Good evening. Welcome to the regular town council meeting of Weaverville on March 28th, 2022. After our last couple of meetings, a couple of council members have suggested to me that we have a boring meeting tonight, and that is our plan, so to be prepared. You all had an opportunity to, let's see, mine, you guys. Councilors, you all had an opportunity to review the agenda for this evening. Are there any adjustments suggested for this agenda? If there are none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah. Yes.
Can we practice a new process on voting? I know y'all are all here tonight, but in the event that you're not all here and some of you are participating remotely, we'd like to get in the habit of doing these by roll call votes. So if we could, Mr. Mayor, if you'll call on James Eller, our town clerk, he can call the roll on these.
So is it, I know that we need to be careful to call roll calls during some members of the vote. Are your intention to do this all the time?
Just because, I mean, it's up to you. It just gets confusing when we don't do it out of habit. But I'll let you choose.
We'll give it a try tonight, and then we'll figure it out later. How's that? Surely we're trainable enough to be able to do it correctly. James, you want to call the roll?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Wood.
Aye.
Councilmember Chase.
Aye.
Councilmember Cordell.
Aye.
Councilmember Jackson.
Aye.
Mayor Fitzsimmons.
Aye.
Vice Mayor McKenna.
Aye.
And Councilmember Nagel.
Yes.
Thank you. You guys did great. Next item is the consent agenda, and town manager, would you go through the items in the consent agenda, please?
Certainly. Good evening, all of you. Consent agenda begins on page 3 of your agenda packet. This begins with a ratification of town council action from your last meeting, which is February 28th. This includes minutes from the January 18 meeting, minutes from the January 15 meeting, February 15 meeting, minutes from the February 24 meeting, budget amendment for police and fire, road closure ordinance for music on Main, amendment to MOU for tailgate market resolution, authorizing remote hybrid meetings during emergencies, and amending and restating capital project ordinance for the community center, and then finally code amendments for noise regulations. If you look on page 4, the approval we're asking for would go with the resolution there. On page 5, you have minutes from the February 28 meeting for your approval. On page 10, the mayor is recommending that town council exercise its appointing authority under code section 2-150A and remove Suzanne Devane as planning board member unless she chooses to resign, and appoint Mark Hendricks, who currently serves on the planning board, as an alternate member to fill the vacancy created by Ms. Devane's removal. This does leave an alternate seat on the planning board, and we would ask that you and your peers and neighbors and family consider applying for a position on the planning board. This would leave an opening, so we would need some applications before we get there. We do not currently have any applications open for the planning board. On page 12 is the beginning of your monthly tax report. As you'll see there, percentage collection is 98.4%, and that is roughly 3.7 million in total current year collections, with about 60,000 left to be collected. On page 17, the community center fundraising program began in February of last year. We would recommend that you approve the budget amendment. This adds $5,384.08 in donations, bringing our total collected donations to $31,854.98, and we would recommend the budget amendment that you see on page 18. On page 19, there's no action necessary on this agenda item, but it is given to you as a notification. as required by 160B compliance, as well as section 20-1303C of our town code, and this is on page 20. See there. On page 21, beginning on page 21, we have two proclamations, one for Earth Day and one for Arbor Day, that we would like for you all to approve. That is all of the consent agenda.
Are there any questions of the town manager? On the consent agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Motion.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Joe?
Councilmember Nagel,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McKenna,
Yes.
Mayor Fitzsimmons,
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson,
Yes.
Councilmember Cordell,
Yes.
Councilmember Chase,
Yes.
Councilmember Wood.
And since you're already on the podium there, town manager, would you continue on with your report for the month?
Certainly, on page 24 of your agenda packet, you will find a very brief town manager's report for the month. First item on there is Arbor Day for this year. We will propose holding our annual Arbor Day program on February 29th at 11 a.m. at Lake Louise Park in Public Works, and we're going to replace a pine tree down there with a dogwood tree, and we will have more information to you on the actual programs for that when time. I'm sorry, did I say? Friday, April 29th. Yes, thank you for that correction. Public Wi-Fi, I'm happy to report to you that we are now, the public Wi-Fi program is now complete. It just, as of recently, finished up the last couple of access points. I will be reporting on this in the e-focus and encouraging folks to get online. Essentially, all you have to do is sign on and bring your mobile device up, bring a town of Weaverville Wi-Fi, and it drops you in. We will plan on giving you regular reports on how this is working and number of users and that type of thing, but at this point in time, as I said, we're just now getting started, so there's really nothing to report. We do expect that Skyrunner will do some optimization all along to the access points, so there may be times when you see some lag when you get on that network, but we anticipate that that's going to continue to improve as we get along. Election precincts update. Back in December, I reported to you that the Board of Elections had notified the town that the United Methodist Church, which was formerly precinct 71.1, would no longer be a voting site, and the precinct would be moved to the community center. Also let you know that precinct 71.1, which had just moved from town hall to the community center, would need to move back to town hall. Town council asked that I follow up with board elections on this and see if we could have this change, and also ask the question about why we need two those precincts. And the Board of Elections did respond to me when I asked that they reconsider these changes, and they indicated that this county is required to have two voting precincts based on the elections for our town, and that swapping the two precinct sites at this point in time would not be possible, and so they shared that this would go forward as is right now, but in the future they would look at not using town hall as we had previously asked them not to use it.
Thank you, town manager. Town clerk, are there any people signed up to speak?
Yes, sir, they are. I've been asked to read a statement regarding general public comments this evening as well, and here goes. Town council appreciates the opportunity to hear from its residents, and a part of each regular meetings is reserved for that purpose. General public comments may be submitted during the meeting or in writing in advance of any meeting topic or any other item of interest. Normal rules of decorum apply to all comments, and duplicate comments are discouraged. Actions and behavior can be questioned, but personal attacks will not be tolerated. This is not a time for town council to listen. This is a time for town council to listen, and town council and staff may not necessarily offer any response during this time. General public comment section of the meeting will be limited to 20 minutes, and priority will be given to those commenters in attendance and those residents of the town. Comments during the meeting are generally limited to 3 minutes. The town manager keeps time. If her alarm indicates that your 3 minutes are up, you will not be cut off mid-sentence. You will be asked to wrap up your statements. If you wish to speak, you must identify yourself by name, state your street address. If in attendance at the meeting, you must come to the podium and speak so we can all hear you. For those attending remotely, at the appropriate time, you will be asked to raise a hand if you would like to give comment. This particular function is found in the reaction button on Zoom. You must be recognized before giving your comment and are asked to turn your video on during your comments if possible. Written comments timely received before the meeting will be provided to town council, included as part of the minutes of the meeting, and read into the records during the 20-minute general public comment period as time allows. We have not received any such written comments this month. And if you'd like more information on how to submit comments, you can contact any of us here at Town Hall. We do have 2 individuals signed up to speak this evening, the first of which is James Heidel of 120 Sam's Road.
James Heidel. I just wanted to say thank you. Over the last 2 months, you guys have really exemplified community leadership. Thank you for agreeing to vet the strategic water priority in order to make strategic decisions rather than tactical ones. Thank you for listening to your community. Not just those that live within your town limits either. You listen to those of us that live without it that will be heavily impacted by your decisions. And so to that end, as a thank you from us, we're donating $1,000 to the town of Weaverville as assistance for you guys in your further water evaluations as you prioritize them. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much.
I apologize if I get the name wrong, but I believe it to be Jay Panciera of 38 Ballard Road.
It's Joy Dancier. Yes, I live at 38 Ballard Road, and I'm co-owner of the building at 220 Merriman Avenue. I'd just like to bring to your attention the traffic situation around Lake Louise, specifically at Lakeshore Drive, Lake Louise Drive, when you come in at that end by the playground and the community center. As someone who drives that from my neighborhood every day, the traffic has just become crazy. And the fact that it's two-way and there are people parking on this side on the left that open their doors to the road. You have kids getting out into the road, parents that have several children trying to corral them in and out. And then you have the traffic trying to pass each other, as well as just people crossing the road. And it's just gotten busier and busier at the lake, just like we have more people in town. And I'm thinking that one solution, which has been brought up twice before, I've heard, is to make it a one-way road around from Lake Louise Drive all the way down Lakeshore and come out at Bankstown Road. Just seems like something is going to happen on the road up there. For one thing, the community center is going to draw more people since there was no one using the community center before. And summer's coming, which means there'll be more use of the playground. I know it would inconvenience some of the neighbors who drive that every day, but I think that for everyone's safety, that could be something that we figure out. it's actually more pleasant taking that road down, even if you feel like takes longer, it's less hassle. I mean, you get aggravated when you're driving there. And the people, the moms and kids, the moms and dads get aggravated as well. So anyway, I'd just like to put a proposal out there that for you to think about that situation. Thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we've had a request to speak on the Ollie Weaver Road project as well. Would you like to hear those comments now or during?
Wanted to do all the public comments right now. On the wall here. And just make sure we have no public participating via Zoom tonight.
Thanks for letting me put some words out. I'm Larry Scott. I live at 105 Monticello Road. We've lived there since 2000. We've been in the area for 30 years. Raised our kids here. Great place. I recommend it to other folks, even if they're moving, outing us out. It's a good town. My home is literally on the city limits. In 1999, I had to come to town hall to get approval for it. Went in the city, but I had to get approval because they felt for some reason it was jurisdiction type control, which it worked out fine, but it is interesting that the control went that far. But literally, I'm on the city limits there. Right now, speaking to the Holly Weaver project, projected 200 and some odd apartments on the 25 acres. Currently, since I live just a little bit off of Holly Weaver, I'm about 200 yards from the entrance to the new project. So I look at it almost every day. It's pretty close. To throw a ball and hit it from my house. Right now, we run 20 to 25 cars that are backed up. You have to wait through several lights to get on the 2570. And it doesn't include what's backed up on Holly Weaver, because there's developments down at the other end, which are beautiful homes. And it's nice to see single-family homes. This project with 200 plus apartments will not help that situation. It appears to me, based on looking at the information put out on the internet from the town, that, and the developer, that there's not another exit except on Holly Weaver. They butt up to Horizon Hills. And there should be, in my mind, no matter what project goes on this property, no matter what project goes on this property, it ought to have more, it ought to have some relief in two different ways, not just to Holly Weaver, but also on the Horizon Hills. And frankly, your fire department would probably greatly appreciate that, because they don't have to wind all through those parking lots to get to the bottom building on fire, or to the ambulance folks. They'd have another exit to come in to make it much easier. I'm not sure why that is. Is somebody here to speak on why that's not like that and drawn into that?
Those are just the plans that we have, initial plans that we developed.
Well, it would make sense to me to put an exit or an entrance at the bottom of that. I do understand growth is coming. I totally get that. And I don't disagree with that. I really don't. That property is a beautiful property. And it's zoned for development. And it ought to be developed. If I was the owner, I would want that. I'd want to be, since cashing out my value, and we as a community have to understand that. People gripe about the houses on the mountain up here, and I said, well, you didn't buy the mountain. You didn't decide not to cut the trees down. You could have bought the mountain. You just talk about it. And I look at it every day. I would like to say this. I really think it'd be great to have some single-family homes as opposed to apartments. And I would welcome that. These folks invest in their schools, in their homes, in the community, the ball teams. So I would love to see single-family homes on that particular property. Tax revenue to the city, about the same.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
So I would like to put that in, ask that you consider that. Because we have, after you're gone, we live with it. Because we're there. And the developer will go on and sell it, but we're all living with it. So let's put something into that helps us all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Searson.
Mr. Daughter, anything others?
No, sir.
Very good. Thank you all for your comments. We'll move on to our discussion action items, and the first item up is a presentation on our bike head study. And Rachel Brunson and Christy Carter, I believe, are going to give us an update.
Right there. So, Mayor Fitzsimmons, Vice Mayor McKenna, who's also on our steering committee, thank you for having me. I'm Christy Carter from Traffic Planning and Design, and I think you all know my lovely coworker, Rachel, who serves on your planning board. Selena emailed us earlier today and said, talk fast. She said it a little nicer than that. So I'm going to skip a lot of what is in here and get to what I think is most important for us in our planning process. But I do want to put a little bit of context to it. So I'm going to skip the plan of purpose. We're trying to figure out how you can get around Weaverville. I will hit this one. One of the factors of why this plan is trying to get the right policy in place when you think about sidewalk, greenway, construction, both from what the town does and how you have developer participation in that process. And that is what I mostly want to talk to you tonight about. We have some things that we've kicked around and talked about, and we thought that that led to an update to you all. And we don't have to get into discussion of introducing the topic, and maybe we can have some more dialogue as we move forward before we get the final plan completed. So just to let you know very quickly, in terms of where we've been in engagement, because that feeds into some of what we've heard and what we're talking about. We've had a steering committee that has met 3 times so far. We've had 1 day-long public meeting. We've had a number of focus group meetings, still have some more. For example, tomorrow morning, we're talking with the school. And we've had about 300 folks involved in one of our engagement activities throughout the life of the plan so far. Again, skipping some of these. People want more stuff. They feel good walking, not so good biking. So I want to get to how we're structuring projects and how this goes into policy development. So far we have developed 15. And this reminds me, Rachel, we need to change. We've changed the name of these because we call them near-term projects, but we feel like that's a little misleading because some of these projects are actually going to take a long time to implement. So we're actually calling these catalyst projects. So we have 15 of those identified. And I just want to kind of draw your attention to 3 because it helps set the stage for what we're thinking about. And remind me, this does not work on the things. Okay, so I'm going to use my pointer. So for A, B, and C, the idea behind this plan is that we kind of anchor everything by downtown so that no matter where you are in town, that you can walk or bike to downtown and feel good about doing that. So we're talking about kind of the area on the other side of 26, Northridge Commons, Walmart, all of that. How would you get from there to downtown? How would you encourage? Probably the community's #1 project and preference is to get all of the stuff going down Maryland Avenue from the new apartments that are being developed, all the existing development out there, to Lake Louise and Lake Louise to downtown. So those are the kind of the big connections, and then just kind of making downtown, around downtown, a little bit more pedestrian friendly. So when you think about those projects, those are all hard projects. And in a lot of ways, what we're thinking about is those are also some of your growth areas. And for already just sitting here a little bit tonight, I've heard some of your growth pressures. I am at my heart a land use planner, and I see Weaverville, and it's hard for me to not think about what's going on without looking at it in terms of growth. And so when we start thinking about those projects, and we start thinking about growth, I'm not going to go through the details of these, then that's when we hit our policy discussion. And so some of the things that we don't feel like we can have, we don't think we can make a good recommendation until we have some conversation with you. Planning and regulation on where sidewalks should occur through development as it happens. We have a draft network for sidewalks, but we kind of want to check that with you in terms of what we've learned, what we know. Do we have that network in the right place? And then how do we anticipate for future areas that are not necessarily in the town yet, but might be annexed into your town?
And we know that's something that you've been dealing with for the last couple of months. And so just to introduce these policy questions that we have, the way your ordinance is written currently is a developer would be required to add a sidewalk, and I don't have the exact language in front of me, but if there's a line on like an adopted town plan, then the developer would be required to build a sidewalk. And a lot of your sidewalks, when development happens, is happening through just negotiation and trying to get the project approved. We think that there is some room for improvement to make that a little bit more concrete to where you can define in your ordinance either a threshold for development. There are a number of different options, but to take some of the guesswork out of where sidewalks are going to go. And why this is important, I think, is going back to that question of growth. A lot of your growth is probably going to happen on the edge of the city or edge of the town, and it's probably going to happen through annexation. And I know there's all kinds of thoughts and things in the community about that, so I'm not advocating growth and annexation one way or the other, but if you are going to annex in, we don't have those lines on a map because those are not in your town, so you have a disconnect in that plan. Now, we can put some lines and make some guesses, but I think just in terms of what we've seen and how this works, maybe that is something for you all to consider, is changing line on a map versus standards in your ordinances, say this is when you should do sidewalk development. That's a big conversation because you have to talk about the threshold of development at one point in time. And I know you're not the city of Asheville, but that's the example that I'm thinking of right now. At one point in time, it used to be 4 or 5 single family units and you had to develop sidewalks. Now the threshold, I think, is 20, somewhere around in there. So another kind of gaping hole in your ordinance is redevelopment. If someone comes in and makes an investment on a property, they are not required to upgrade the sidewalks that would be along their property. A lot of communities do require that. That saves the town, that either can fill some sidewalk gaps or that can upgrade some of your sidewalks at an expense that's not the town's. So another area, and we haven't talked as much about this one, is the idea of pedestrian context areas, and that's kind of a jargony way to say there are different places in your town that might need different widths of sidewalks. Downtown actually has pretty narrow sidewalks for a lively downtown environment. You see that pressure around Well-Bred Bakery where people want the outside dining. You put the outside dining there, you can't really walk on the sidewalk. So if redevelopment happens and you have pedestrian context areas that say we need wider sidewalks in this area, is that something that you want? Would that be good to help your town accomplish its goals? Another area, and this is a conversation that you would definitely want to engage Jennifer in, is currently if a developer comes in and says, yeah, we can't make this sidewalk work, you handle that through the Board of Adjustment process. And there are a lot of communities in North Carolina who, instead of going through the Board of Adjustment process, will have a fee in lieu program. The reason I'm bringing that up is you're leaving money on the table, where if you do a fee in lieu, a developer can't meet it, you can have them do fee in lieu. That can go into a sidewalk fund where you can make repairs, you can build sidewalks, because you're limited in funding what you can do currently. And then the last one, as I kind of started with this, but I want to end with it as well, is that policy of build a sidewalk if it's on a plan. We're developing this plan. We either need to kind of have some more conversation on where those lines go on future development areas, or we need some direction and say, maybe this is a good time to think about our policy and change it. And I can make a recommendation that says, this is the policy direction or that you should head in. That does leave some gray area in terms of what happens between now and the time you got that policy developed. You could have some gaps in sidewalks. So all that is to say, these policy questions are ways to help the town think about how to become more pedestrian friendly in a way to maybe share some of that cost with the development community. So I think, Selena, I did that really quick. But what I'm looking for are questions or just some thoughts that you have, or if we need to have a more in-depth conversation, how that might happen. In terms of what we are working toward, we have another public meeting, April 7th. We don't have to have this part worked out by then, but after that public meeting, we start getting ready to get the document ready for, we start producing the full document, the full set of recommendations, and start bringing it to you for adoption. So that's where we are with that.
Good work. What question, any questions anyone have for Christie?
Yeah, Chrissy, are there any other towns, or cities in the area that you think are kind of navigating through this well? You know, there's a lot of complicated trade-offs here.
There are a lot of complicated trade-offs, exactly. Towns that are navigating through it well. I think you all are in an unusual position where you really are in a period of growth and maybe, I think you're figuring out maybe what are the best tools to adopt for that. A lot, in terms of in this area, you know, again, you're not, comparing to the city of Asheville is not the best example. I think they have more tools in their toolbox to deal with this. In Buncombe County, maybe the most comparable is Black Mountain, and they have done some of these steps in terms of developer participation, in terms of sidewalk development. I would have to look and see if Black Mountain does speed and blue. I am not 100% sure about that. That's a good question for comparison. We can look that up. But there are towns all over North Carolina that have a variety of these tools. So I think anything that we're proposing to you is not like a dangerous legal ground. Jennifer may differ, I'm not the attorney. But they are tools that you can adopt. It's just whether you think they work for you.
I greatly appreciate this. Sitting on planning and zoning for a year, what we kept, and Rachel's on there hearing feedback was that, council needs to give a plan before we kind of write these ordinances, so we're not building sidewalks to nowhere. And I think we've made some interesting strategic choices, and Creekside is interesting that they have, you know, a sidewalk going down Merriman Avenue, runs into the Sanford Loop and you can't get across.
Yeah.
I think another interesting scenario then is up by Walmart, down that road, so we just put in 58 townhomes, and they can't get to Walmart. And so, you know, I think strategically, you know, we're looking, there's apartments, 2 apartment complexes across the street, so there's 600. How they get there, without hurting somebody who's, so we'll pick on, you know, if you were, you know, on Reeves Creek Road and we annexed you, and we said you're putting in 30 houses, do they really need a sidewalk on Reeves Creek Road? They might need sidewalks in their development, and that was what planning, you know, the zoning was like, okay, we're gonna make them put sidewalks on Reeves Creek Road to go in either direction, because it leads to nowhere. And then who owns it, right? So we tell them to put them in, and then we as a town own that sidewalk, and we have to upkeep it.
Yep.
So I think strategically, you know, the 3 you pointed out, you know, complicated, but necessary. I mean, Creekside, we're getting, I don't know if it's 130, what's the apartments in Cow Pasture, Dale White's property?
132.
132 plus Creekside. Those people are gonna walk to Lake Louise.
Yeah.
One way or the other,
Yeah.
and somebody's gonna get hurt.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll address that and then come back to kind of what I think you're saying. We do, since we're not going through all of the projects, we have kind of a rough plan, kind of a phased plan, Creekside, how that interacts with the new development, and then in the future, how that could interact with the Reeves Creek Greenway. We've had some discussion with town and discussion with NCDOT. There is that dilemma of there's no really great place to cross there, but people are doing it and will do it. And so what's the best solution that we can come up with? So we are trying to address that through the plan through projects. But to go back to your other point of that sidewalk to nowhere concept, sometimes that can be okay depending on where your growth areas are. As I mentioned, I am a land use planner at my heart, and I'm gonna do a bad policy here, your future land use map is not very good, it could be a lot better. It would make some of those decisions easier, so that you could say, kind of look a little bit more clearly and kind of say, okay, this is a pedestrian context area, and we want sidewalks here. I hear you on Reeves Creek, all up and down Reeves Creek doesn't totally make sense to have sidewalks, but maybe that's where you say, at baseline, we want some type of connectivity, we want pedestrian safety. If it is technically infeasible for you to meet that, then pay into our fee in lieu, and you have a little bit of resources to do something somewhere else. It is, and going back to that kind of the lines on the map, if that's the way you think continues to work best for you in terms of what your policy says, then I would encourage you to do a little easier to read and understand future land use map. You know, you're not asking me for land use advice, I'm giving it to you. And the other thing that I will say, I think that makes it harder for you, and I'm stepping out of my lane a little bit. I'm also on the consulting team that's working on Buncombe County Comprehensive Plan, and we've been doing a series of meetings. We had one at the community center last week. And Buncombe County in general projected to grow between 55,000 and 83,000, depending on which kind of number and model you want to use. And I think places like Weaverville and Black Mountain and Woodfin on the edges are going to be the ones who feel the brunt of that growth. And so how you all choose to deal with that and how you integrate pedestrian and bicycle and greenway connectivity into that is a big question. If I were sitting in your seats, that I would kind of be wrestling with, but again, realize I'm stepping out of my lane, I'm not sitting in your seat, but I think it all fits together and is important to think about.
Yeah, I mean, the land use plan, we kind of talked about that, it's a really great core to build on. But, you know, James and Cully did a really good job, I think, of saying, here's logical areas for this type of zoning. But now we have to kind of go a second level down, instead of waiting on stuff to come to us and react. What do we want over there, and how does that connect here? And put that second level vision over the top of it.
Yes.
I may email you later offline, because I have some specific ideas about Creekside
Okay.
that I wouldn't mind
Sure.
sharing with you, so. We don't-
Yeah. And, I mean, yes, please do contact us, and Councilman Buchanan has been really great about feeding us information and thoughts of how to move forward as well.
I had a question.
I forgot to mention that Councilwoman Cordell is also on our committee.
Thank you. Because they won't let us build a walkway over next to the bridge, they're coming from Creekside to the lake. Have you ever seen a stoplight in both directions of a bridge so that if there were pedestrians, they could push a button and it would make both lights stop and then people could actually use the bridge?
Both ends of the bridge, I think that's a little bit unusual, but I'm looking at Rachel.
I'm just wondering, because we can't be the only place that has a bridge with no one.
You're not, and I think that with Reeves Creek Greenway, I think there are some options. I think it's just a matter of getting the okay to go in there and start, for that team to go in there and start digging around some of the options. I think there are some short-term options, and then there are the longer, big-term, more expensive options, but I think there are options. That's a good idea. I honestly do not know.
I've seen my crossing thing, I don't know, putting it on both sides of the bridge.
I mean, and with Reeves Creek Greenway, going back to that whole Creekside thing, that is one of the things that we're thinking about in terms of like, what do you do now? What do you do midterm and what do you do long-term? I think you're gonna have to think through some options.
Well, what I'm thinking of, I think I've seen something similar to this in West Virginia, but the reason it existed is because the road fell off on one side and it never got repaired. So it ended up becoming a one-lane road for a short period of time and then crossing the bridge. And the only time that we read on both sides is when something significant happened. People were aware.
Yeah, I've done that, like, I've seen that application in bicycling where you get permission to go. I don't have a pedestrian application, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But we can, and if you know where that example is and we can look at it, we'd be happy to. So. Okay.
You have any questions for Kristen?
So the one thing I would like is kind of how do we move forward? And you know, if it's, you all need to have some conversation and come back to us, I need some direction on where we're going, or do we just put the recommendations in of what they think they should be, and you all vet them then?
So one thing we could do is consider the questions you presented to us at our workshop in April.
Budget. Budget, April, May, June. We have to have budget by June.
As a member to make sure that hold our feet to the fire and get some input back to you.
Okay, so Selena, one thing, if you are in budget season and this needs to be, and we do need conversation time, we could talk to DOT, finish everything but that part, and possibly have, not interrupt your budget season, which I know is sacred time.
It's legislative time.
Yeah.
What I might suggest is that you have meetings 2 to 3 in a group
Okay,
with council and get some input in that. How does that?
okay,
I don't think they easily buy Zoom.
okay. We'll work with Aaron and James to arrange that.
I think it's important that, you know, we have the input while you're working on this.
Okay.
As opposed to waiting.
Okay, we prefer that, but we can,
Yeah, so I think if we can get, you know, 2 or 3 at a time and have some meetings like that,
okay,
maybe that'll get you what you, hopefully that what you.
okay, we can do that. All right, and shall we?
I assume that the slides you did not talk about are in the package you give us, so.
Yes,
Yes. so-
yes, I shouldn't say yes, I should look at James and Selena and,
We put it in the presentation.
okay.
So I encourage everyone to review their packets.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if anybody from the community meeting, we could be early and late, you guys do that too.
Thank you. So the next item is the Ollie Weaver Road project, and we're going to ask Town Attorney Jackson to bring us up to date on what the latest developments are on the project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we all know, the town is in receipt of an annexation petition that asks for R12 zoning for potentially a 244-unit multifamily apartment complex on approximately 25 acres out off of Ollie Weaver Road and Monticello Road intersection area. A water commitment application has also been submitted and is contemplated. It's also contemplated for this project. At your last meeting, you heard, you held 2 public hearings and heard from various folks concerning the annexation and proposed zoning. And this is sort of a combined agenda item on all of the issues, the water decision, zoning decision, and annexation. But I wanted to let you know that the folks representing the owners and developers were in attendance at the public hearing and did hear those comments as well. And they have come back with a slightly different process that they would like to go forward with on the zoning. And that is that they would like to submit a conditional district application for the development of the property. And we propose that town council go ahead and vote on the annexation and the water. They have both of those actions conditioned upon your vote to approve a conditional district. The problem is that that process takes some time, and so we wanted we need to build in some time for that. So what I just handed out is you have in your packet a draft ordinance, a draft annexation ordinance. What you see before you with the highlighted portions are the changes to that I will propose based on what the developer has requested. And really, it's merely to make the annexation not effective until August 31st, 2022, and expressly conditioned upon the successful adoption of a conditional district ordinance by you as town council applicable to the territory that's to be annexed in, or the adoption of a conventional district should there be one that is meets the will of council or the applicant's requests. I've got in here that failure to adopt a conditional district will result in, or a conventional district will result in automatic nullification of the annexation ordinance if it's not done before September 1. So we've got a September 1 deadline, and one of two things could happen. Either the zoning is in place with the proper ordinances and the annexation becomes effective, or we haven't successfully resolved the zoning by that deadline and there is no annexation or water, same type of conditions on a water request. This allows, I think, and the developers representatives are here if they, I'm sure are willing to answer questions for you should you have them. But this gives a little bit of time. As you know, conditional districts allow a little more give and take between the town and the applicant, so that if there are conditions that you really would like to reasonably impose on the development, this is the best way to do that. For instance, if you want it capped at a certain number of units, if you want a certain density in there, you could, I've heard access points, if you wanted to require second access through the Garrison Ridge Road side, you could condition upon that. So this seems to be a way to reserve to town council the right to continue to think about this and think about the reasonable conditions that you could impose in order to make this development work. But it also gives the developer some assurance that the town is working towards getting a solution figured out. So I'm going to, so I passed out an ordinance with highlighted provisions. I'm also going to pass out, this is the next thing I'm passing out is a concept plan, which has been presented by the developer as a concept that they would like to go forward with on conditional district. Just so you have some vision in mind. What it does, it maintains the multifamily complex, but it also has in it a commercial area, and I think their intention is to approach some medical offices, some healthcare related services for development on that commercial area. All of those would have to be, all of that would have to be packaged into a conditional district application, and then vetted through the planning board like you normally do, and then come back to you for public hearing and review. What I think they would like to do though is for you to consider having initially considered this and go ahead and send it to the planning board so that we don't waste another. Questions, I'm sure.
What questions do I have?
I'll take the next statement. I don't think, and I know some you know, but here we received this 45 minutes into the meeting, first copy of it. I don't like the speed at which it's being handled, I'm not against it, but the process of not receiving it until we're in the middle of a council meeting seems very inconsiderate of the ones responsible for this. I just don't like it way of operating, to not have the information ahead of time. We're talking about the important vote. say this is something. I'm not against it necessarily, but I'm just saying this is not the way to handle things from a developer's standpoint. And I assume we just received this.
This has been in conversation most of today, so yes.
First time I've seen it.
What other questions you have?
Do you think there's a possibility to get a traffic study at some point?
Good question. They have anticipated that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that is in process and nearing completion. So that it should be absolutely available with either with their application or with the planning board review.
Jennifer, one other question. This other sheet here says multifamily units provided 264, and their initial call was for 244. So it's been raised by 20. I'm not that smart on some things, but this doesn't look like to me.
Staff questioned that as well, and I may have the developer come explain that.
Let's wait. 'Cause
I like to hear that.
well, there may be more questions. Right.
What other questions? Does anyone have any more questions for the attorney?
So Jennifer, I heard you say that going down this road, we would go back through the planning process for their review, there would be public input and comment
On the zoning.
on the zoning. Okay.
All right, let me ask a high level question. Why is this document even necessary?
They've got an annexation agreement or an annexation petition for you. They've got a water request
Right.
for you. They've got some due diligence that they are under, just like most developers in this situation.
So we voted pause and then we took no action. So they can withdraw that application and present us with additional zoning without this document. Like, I've never seen this before. Like, you guys are on cutting edge. This is cutting edge stuff.
We're out there.
So we're gonna seek additional zoning application in a few minutes from Duke Power. But they didn't ask us to sign something like this, right? So they may not like what we did last month, but no, Doug made a motion, we paused, seconded, voted pause, no action on the water. So if they want conditional zoning, they could just put it in an application for conditional zoning? Am I missing?
They can't.
Right, okay, they can. So in my humble opinion, it's an unnecessary document. I'm not the lawyer, I'm not the mayor. It's an unnecessary document. In my,
Well, I think you're right, Audie, if the developer did submit a conditional use zoning request and we approved it, then of course, water and annexation will come along with it.
So there is an annexation petition in front of you. You can continue to pause on that while they pursue the conditional district. They have a water commitment application that is also pending. Again, that is a decision that also is, I believe, on hold at this point.
right,
Waiting
no,
for the conditional.
but no action. I mean, are we required by law to take action?
No,
Right, so no action is, whatever. It's a no kind of maybe, I don't know. But we're not required by law, just because the developer wants us to say yes or no. We are allowed to take no action. That doesn't help him, I get it. He now goes, if I'm a developer and no action is taken, I'm taking that as a no. But it's not a no, and I know we asked you that at the end of the meeting. And you're like, no, we took no action on the water.
Okay, I want to speak for a minute, please, thank you. 25 acres minus 3.7 for commercial gives you 21 point something times 12 is not 264, times 12 and a half is 266. So not only did we hear 30, 40, 60 people come up and say, we really don't want 12 next door, but now we've told the developer we really would like to have something different. And they've come back with 12 and a half and we'll take 3.5 acres away and put a commercial building on it. And then this future connector, we talked about the fact that there needs to be ingress, regress. And so, as somebody would say, read my lips, Garrison Branch is the majority of this land. You need to come in and out of that area because you need an ingress regress to go on to 2570. And, you know, it's our job also to listen to the public that shows up. And when they come and say, please don't put 12 units or 12 and a half or 16 or whatever next to my house, they live in R1. They bought their houses in R1. That's where they think they live. And yes, they live in Buncombe County, but we're still listening to them. There are 5 subdivisions that surround this area. I can't tell you to put a subdivision there, but I can tell you that one fits better there. I can tell you that maybe we had it as listed as R3. R3 allows you to have 8 per acre. It would be very simple for us to say, it's R3. R3, 25 times 8 is 202 apartments. That would be really simple for us. You're not making it simple for us. You're making it harder and harder for us to be good to all of our people in town and outside. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Catherine. Any other questions for the attorney?
So with that in mind, with this conversation in mind, I would like to say that you have applications that are in hand. You are all right that that the decisions do not have to be made today. As a matter of fact, on the water, the town manager has recommended that you approach water carefully, given the conversations or the decisions have not yet been made on your water treatment plant. But all procedures have been followed, and it is properly before you should you wish to make it. It can be made independently of the annexation decision or coordinated with it. The zoning decisions and the annexation decisions, both the public hearings, all the necessary steps have been taken so that it is properly before you. But a zoning decision would either be to adopt, reject, reasonably modify and adopt proposed zoning, which I believe could be, if you wanted to change the zoning down to R3, I think that would not have to go back to the planning board for review because it's a less intense use. If we go commercial, I think that's a very different use, and I think it would need another planning board review and another hearing. You could also refer it back to the planning board for further considerations. Just because the planning board found that R12 was reasonable and consistent with your comprehensive land use plan does not mean that you are bound by that decision. Any decision that you make can serve as an amendment to your plan, so that's not a concern. On annexation, the boundaries that are within the town is an absolute discretion for town council. That is the epitome of what your job is, to define what area that you wish to bring in and serve the town. There's not a time frame that is prescribed for annexation, but certainly at some point a lack of action starts to look like a no. I will say on the water that you do have an application that's been pending since October. And there's not a time frame that's set out in your code, but I do think a court will impose a reasonableness time frame. And so it would not surprise me if the applicant wishes you to go ahead and make a decision on it, and failing to do so tonight or sometime soon may cause them to think about some legal action to force that decision.
I was just going to say, echoing what Andrew said regarding the document. And I mentioned, of course, on 264, Catherine delineated it in much more detail there. I'm just surprised that we were offered this as a beginning point that is more dense than what we had a month ago. This is a starting point. So I'm a little bit surprised that this is being offered at this level. We can change it, but I mean, I would expect it to come down somewhat reducing instead of increasing.
So I wanted to, go ahead, sorry. I don't know, I think maybe the four of us were on council when we talked about the Dale White's cow pasture across from the lake. And I think we made a mistake there by not talking about conditional zoning. So she was zone industrial. My heartache for her, in that we changed the way the zoning is, and we went to a straight R12, knowing that 2.5 acres or something like that, I don't know the exact numbers, is in a floodplain. So it did what Catherine just described. That isn't really R12. It's actually almost R16 in the usable land. So, and then we talked about crosswalks. We just talked about sidewalks and crosswalks and how the heck you get across Reed's Creek. We could have probably navigated all that with conditional zoning. We probably could have had a developer pay for a footbridge across the creek into Bill Lawrence's property, which is a floodplain, and gotten so sometimes I think we forget that conditional zoning may be a better tool. And that requires maybe more meetings, unfortunately, versus this straight up decision, that Dale, she asked for our job, and we talked about it for 20 minutes and said, yeah, and if you haven't driven by there, we're gonna have the world's largest retaining walls in the town of Weaverville. Drive by there.
Conditional zoning could certainly give council a lot more leeway, a lot more influence over what the conditions of that property would be. So I think there is a lot of reason to find that desirable. I would think that we need to get Doug's question answered here about the increased number of units in maintenance time. Could you address that, please?
Actually, if you give me a point of privilege, I've got a couple of things I think address. Some things that Ms. Jackson said, as well as Mr. Nagel, as well as Ms. Cordell. And I'm going to combine a couple of different things. One, we were trying to pick up on a lot of input that was being offered to us to come up with a plan that we thought was being heard. We submitted a plan that you got in front of you as a concept plan through various members of staff and elected officials over a week ago. So it hasn't been out there, but it's a concept plan. And so we're trying to receive that feedback. In terms of the units, I can let Warren Sugg, who's our engineer, address that. But I think I'm gonna make it easier and more simple, as Ms. Cordell asked. If we can, at this point, I think Ms. Jackson will say this is okay, amend our current request to the R3 and have the R3 and the annexation, the water request go through, while at the same time, we can work with the town planning staff to come up with a conditional zoning request, because that does offer a lot of tools, and that's what you see here, where if you look at, I think the gentleman earlier asked for an exit on the other side of the development. That's certainly what this has, and it's got commercial in it. And I won't get to the units, but if we come up with the R3 and then say, hey guys, that's what you guys end up with. If you can't figure out the conditional zoning, let us go back through that process. At least we have something now that's super simple and super easy to get us off of this piece. Because where we are and why it feels so awkward as it's coming through, and this is addressing Mr. Nagel's original concern, is that we have different legal positions that we've addressed with your town attorney. She's very capable, and this is a compromise position. A compromise position often look really awkward when you don't know the backstory and the context. So that's how we ended up in this weird spot. But I 100% agree with Ms. Cornell to make this simple and just simply say, you know what, annexation at R3, water commitment, and then go see if you can figure out something to refine that with conditional zoning. And if not, you're stuck with the R3. I think that's acceptable and pretty simple for everyone to understand.
R3, so you're proposing R3?
Yes, sir.
The entire tract?
Yes, sir.
R3 being 8 per acre, 25 times 8, 202. Right.
Warren is my resident nerd, yes.
202, I believe is what it would come to. 203.6, I can handle it.
But I think that gives us a toehold in the real world part that we have to deal with, the legal part, but also incentivizes us to do the things that we think can make this a better development and kind of address the things that we've heard the neighbors say, we've heard elected officials say, we've heard your town planner say, but gives us a chance to go give that a real go without the uncertainty of not being able to have the annexation in the R3. Thank you.
So 30 days ago, we decided unanimously that we were going to table this.
on this, and we were not gonna take any action, we were gonna just sit back and wait and see what happens with traffic studies and so on. We had 60 people or more in here who are opposed to this, and so now these 60 people aren't here, we're gonna decide to do this. I don't have, this, like Doug said, this showed up, 10 minutes ago, and maybe it's been in the works for a week, but I don't know that. I know that I've had this for 10 minutes. I know that we have a room full of people who said, please don't do this. And we told them, okay, we're not. And
We
now
just
we are.
changed it again. So Catherine just.
I know, but let's bring the 60 people back. See what they have to say about that. Do we need to do another public hearing on this again?
Well, just because I'm okay with it doesn't mean everybody else.
Sorry, I believe that Brittany said that no, with an R3, you would not, it's less sensitive to what they're going to work on.
So I don't want to go tell those people, 30 days ago, we said, okay, we're good, and now we're not.
We have 800 apartments around there. We don't, there's gonna be more than Monticello. Let's spread them out and have a community, not a concentration. There are 800 there now, and they'll be building more down the curve on Monticello. If you do this, make my property, annex me, I'm gonna put a big high rise on mine, right there on Monticello. Let's make everybody do it.
So,
I'm sorry, I shouldn't.
point well taken. Very, very, very good point. Yeah, and I'm just speaking for me now, I think what the developer would like is for us to vote and say no, no. So I would rather say no, no. I'm not in favor of being told I have to vote on something I don't have to vote on. I'm a reasonable human being. No, no. Submit a conditional zoning, go through the new procedures. Yes, they got money and time invested, I understand all that. But the no gets you to, is what I said is, yeah, do R3 worst case, but we'll talk about conditional. Okay, so that's kind of what I was hearing in that. But if that doesn't work, it's gonna go on that way R3. Won't take it. So, the no gets it done, he's happy, and he can sue us if he wants to or not, and whatever the hell happens. But, I would rather see it come back through the proper channels again with conditional zoning and follow those steps, and then maybe 300 people show up, not 60. I couldn't see how many were in here because it was on the monitor. Yeah, I screwed up obviously by not saying Andrew Nagel votes yes or no. So I apologize for that. So that's my 5 cents.
Other questions, people, either for the attorney or for the developer's representatives?
John?
It does. I'm kind of leaning toward conditional zoning and don't have to do the process.
I think that I'm safe to say the council would appreciate it and seeing a conditional zoning, a conditional use of zoning request and project, that we would certainly be willing to entertain that. Is that correct, everyone?
So if that's the case,
So is there any motion or action that the council wishes to initiate at this point?
I'm flipping a coin to make a motion to say no to his 2 applications. Like I said, I need a second. So, then he knows where we stand. So I'm gonna make a motion to deny his.
When you say no, no, would you be more specific?
So if I want to, we'll make a motion to deny his annexation R12 that we have on the books. And then I guess you want me to do them separately or together, Jennifer?
so there are three things. There's annexation, zoning, and water. You could say no to the zoning and the water and leave the annexation open so that they don't have to go through the whole process.
So they can come back and change the annexation to, so if I say.
The annexation, the zoning part of it is separate.
It's 12, where we want that condition. So you understand what's in my brain, right?
Thanks, sir.
It's scary.
So can you reiterate that for us?
So, I think, Councilmember Nagel is proposing to entertain a motion or propose a motion to, deny R12 zoning, deny the water commitment application. If I can add some words here, based on the need to take a conservative approach to, water outside of town limits right now. And hold open the question of annexation.
So,
Okay, Is there any discussion or questions about the motions on the floor?
I'm just gonna need to have that explained to me at like a third grade level, because I don't understand what you just said.
Can you try again, Jennifer, please?
Yes, so this is no to the R12 zoning. This is no to the water application that is before town council right now.
Did we already do no to the R12 zoning last?
That was the push.
Okay.
And we walked away from the water. We took no action.
Which is also an option that's available tonight. To do nothing and wait until we get the conditional zone.
I have a question. So basically, this supplement that we got tonight will be obsolete
It's just.
for now.
Correct.
Any other questions about the motion on the floor? Is there a second?
You said one motion, just one thing, you're gonna have a second.
Motion is for.
Did you read it again? Motion is to deny the application for R12 zoning and to deny the water application based on a need to be conservative with water applications outside of town limits and to not take action on the annexation petition at this time.
Can I ask a question along this line, Jennifer? Maybe it's procedural, maybe not. On the second point of, denying the water request based on being conservative, what's the difference between doing that on this proposal and just having a quote moratorium?
I think because you actually have an application in hand. You need to.
Okay, got it.
But I also heard discussions here of not making a decision on the water until we got the conditions on the new proposal back, rather than denying the water.
That would be an option as well. That's not the motion that Andrew has made. That would be an option that's available to us also.
Here's what we said 5 years ago. If you get voluntarily annexed, you get water.
Yes.
So we stopped selling water to people outside of town. I haven't changed my mind. We can deny the zoning, we can deny the annexation and approve the water and build it to Buncombe County. It won't be in the town, they won't pay town taxes. Try to be happy because he's charging twice as much for water. And right, okay, so we kind of haven't done that in almost 4 or 5 years. So I don't disagree with you. But I think he's looking for an answer. We don't have, like I said earlier, that's why I was flipping a coin, we don't have to give an answer. Last month, we didn't take any action on the water. Okay?
And which is an option again tonight to take no action, and we've indicated to the developer that we are receptive to the idea of seeing conditional in application and plan based on conditional zoning.
I will never vote to sell somebody water outside of town. I haven't, and I'm not going to. So that's one of the reasons I'm saying. What we told them in 2019, the same group, same piece of land was voluntarily get annexed, then we'll talk. And we were saying, no, landowner doesn't want to pay your taxes until they have a project on board. I think that's almost a quote. They should want to pay our town taxes until we have the project on board. But it was the statement, I think, in 2019, something of that nature. So if I don't get a second, guys, and that's okay.
So let me just try to simplify things for folks. Andrew's made a motion to deny R12 and deny water. Another option it would be to accept the proposal from the developer, which is to annex it with under R3 and then accept a conditional zoning request later for the property. Or the third option would be to do nothing and wait on the conditional use zoning application. Okay, simplifying for folks.
Well, and with the conditional use zoning application with a new concept plan, we've already seen this one, we don't like this one. With a new concept plan, John's very interested, and I understand the traffic study. I think a lot of people are.
And Chris, if I'm wrong, here, but traffic study with this many units would be required anyway.
Yes.
Traffic study's already been done and is submitted to Raleigh. We're waiting on Rod to sign off on it, so NCDOT will sign off on it. And just some context on the water piece again, I alluded to the legal positions that we've been discussing with your council is our position that because of the USDA loan that funded the water line, that there is no discretion in order to afford water, whether inside the town limits or not. So that's the position that we've taken on that. We believe that that position is sound, and we do not think that this town can turn down water regardless of where it is. And that's the awkward part of how we ended up with this position.
Yeah, I disagree with that too, but I appreciate your opinion.
So what he's saying, just to be clear, what he's saying is, because we took the USDA loan, we are not in control of our water. And then he thinks the USDA and the courts will back him up. And I don't think any of us, so we go pay off the loan tomorrow and refinance it another way. I don't think anybody on this committee voted for that USDA loan, thinking in the right mind, we were never gonna be allowed to tell somebody no for water. So I'm personally willing to put the town, our money, we probably have to hire a lawyer at risk to defend that.
So back to the issue at hand.
So we have a motion.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second for the motion?
Please read the motion again. Motion to deny R12 zoning and to deny the water application due to a need for conservative approach with out-of-town water customers right now, and to not take action on the annexation at this time, pending potential action on a conditional district application. Fair statement, or do you want further amendments to it?
I could talk for hours, that's as fair as I'm quiet. Yes, that's still my motion.
Is there a second?
Is there a second to this motion?
I'll second that.
I would say,
Town clerk, would you take a roll call?
Any further discussion?
No, any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Councilmember Nagel,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McKenna,
Yes.
Mayor Fitzsimmons,
No.
Councilman Jackson,
yes.
Councilman Cordell,
Yes.
Councilman Chase,
Yes.
Councilman Wood.
Can we move forward to hearing more from the development? Next item is the consideration of a conditional district, using for a Duke Energy substation. And Mr. Allen.
Yes, sir. If you'll bear with me for just one moment, please.
Thinking about that? Thought I had a lot to say about that.
Said this was gonna be.
I know, it's Robert.
I'm back from vacation.
My apologies for the short delay there. A lot of talk about conditional zoning this evening, and that trend will continue. Staff is in possession of a conditional district application for 33 acres of property located on Hickory Lane. Hickory Lane is also vicinity, you'll pardon me, Chief, I'm going to lean over you for a moment. This is Aiken Road flowing in this direction, and this is I-26 right here at the bottom of the screen. It's pretty important to pull this map up to give you an indication of what it is that's being proposed on the property, which is a Duke Energy substation. You can see the footprint of that up off of Aiken Road there. You can see the transmission lines coming in, flowing from south to north on the property as well. I don't really have a whole lot to add at this point, other than this has also been looked at by planning staff, public works staff, fire staff. No comment came out of that technical review committee meeting. It's a bit of a weird situation here where we don't have any habitable structures or anything like that. We also didn't have a very neat way for our ordinances to treat proposal. We decided to go the conditional route, which is why this is before you this evening. This initial consideration of conditional districts is very specifically to get the initial opinions of town council. That would be the appropriate time to share those thoughts if you have them, so they can be incorporated into the plans moving forward as they progress on to planning board level for their review and comment as well. It's my understanding that we have at least one representative of the application who is joining us remotely. And if that is the case, and they have some things to share with council, I would ask for them to use the raise your hand function on Zoom over there. And I'll keep an eye on Trent and see if he gets a hand. That being said, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and then I'll check back with Trent on the back end of those questions. Yes, sir.
That whole green area, is that just to be left natural or can it be used for other things with conditions on it?
It's my understanding that the darker green area are areas of the property to be left undisturbed. So that vegetation as it stands right now is going to remain on the property. I think it's also important to note that the majority of your surrounding residential development is found to the rear of the property here. And you do have some other single-family homes in the area as well. This plan shows the structure being located toward the center of the property, as well as retain as much vegetation as they think that they can, while also developing the property in order to accommodate the structures that will be all there.
How big is, how many acres will the substation take up?
I don't know the exact answer to that. I may ask, I think I saw a hand on the screen, so we'll transition to that. And let's flag that for the representative of our applicant. Yes, sir.
Quick question. I'm having a hard time reading this to see, is this a cut slope or a fill slope condition? There's looks like a lot of new topo lines being generated. They look really tight and steep.
I would ask our applicant to circle back around to that as well. Because, to answer that question in a roundabout way, because there weren't any water lines being supplied to the property, we had to get into that level of detail. Dale has some language about cut and fill slopes as it relates to the water lines, but not so much with the zoning of the property.
So, yep, so it's currently zoned R3?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is the, for the town, what is the taxable value of this project?
I do not know the answer to that. I don't know how it's going to be appraised on the back end.
So I have zero experience in this, so it'll get appraised at X. And then they pay 32 cents per hundred, just like I do.
Same rate as everyone else, unless we experience an exempt property.
Okay, so love to know some history on that, of what, there's obviously more than one Duke substation in town. So I'd like to know, because if we go R3 and it was developed at 8 per acre, that's 270 buildings. You know, if they're single family homes, that'd be a little tight, 8 per acre, that's 8 to 8, but that's Berkeley Terrace at 300,000. So that's $81 million of property, taxable property. So just would A, be curious of what they should, I would expect them to know what other 271 by 300 substations values are, so we can just know if we're gaining tax or we're losing tax. The second question I would have, probably gonna have to be answered by the developer. I looked at the maps and I may be missing it. Which way are the power lines going out of Aiken Road? Left or right? Because if they go left, then our giving up that land is supplying the county with power. Because we have no town, you can see, the town limits stop at the highway, so just be curious, where is the power going? Is it to feed Woodfin's water customers on the other side of Aiken Road to the new apartment complex that's being built? Or is this actual power for the town of Weaverville taxpayers?
It would normally be for reaching the area, wouldn't it?
Say again?
I said it normally be for area of reaching, not one specific tax thing.
No, no project, but that's certainly a question for the developer.
Right, if they don't send power lines, I'm not a power engineer, but they only go with the left across 26, and they're not, this isn't giving any new power to town. We're giving them that. I agree with you, it's for a region, not for a specific project.
So is our representative from Duke available?
See if I can.
Let's see if it will call it, so we don't scribble.
Hello.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, my name is James Shepard, and I work for HDR. So we're the engineering firm for Duke Energy on this project.
So anyone wants to start with the questions you had for him?
Sure. Do you know which way the power is going out of here?
So, yes, sir. So initially, this is a substation. So the high voltage transmission lines will be coming in the rear of the station, and then the distribution circuits will come out of the front of the station and go towards Aiken Road. So currently, it's going to be built with 2 circuits as the initial, and ultimately the ultimate build out could be as many as 4 circuits. And currently, my understanding is the plan is for them to go to Aiken Road and 1 circuit to go in each direction currently. So that is the current plan. I'm not the distribution engineer, but that is my understanding of how the distribution will be laid out. And as we're finalizing the design, we are still getting some information on that final piece there, but that is the current plan.
And my second question was, it's somebody to figure out what the approximate, based on other substations in our area, what's the property tax value?
Sure, I can take that back to Duke. I'm not able to answer that question. The one thing that I would say is with this site, I was sort of listening to the conversation, and the one thing to keep in mind, we've had a real challenge designing this because the site actually has about 300 feet in elevation difference from the road to the back of the site. So we've created multiple different scenarios trying to get this to fit in there to some reasonable standard to minimize the impact to our surrounding area by leaving as many trees as we can and working on that. So the grade of the site and the topo of the site does limit the availability to build on a good portion of the property.
John, does that answer your question, or would you like to have a Joe answer your
I was
question?
curious if it was a cut or fill slope condition.
Yeah, so what we're doing is the property is a low point by Aiken Road, so that'll be a fill area. Then we get up to the elevation pad of 2110, then everything behind that is actually going to be cut. So we have a 4-to-1 slope up to the transmission lines, and then we will be doing a 2-to-1 slope, and we have a landscape designer who's trying to get the right seed mixture, natural seed mixture in the area so that we can slope that and make sure that it's stable for long-term maintenance of the station and limit any drainage onto the pad to make sure that the site still drains positively and does not negatively impact the site.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for our representative from HDR? James, would you describe to folks exactly what the process would be if we approve this tonight?
I think the action that your staff will be asking of you is to forward this to the planning board for their review and recommendation as it relates to the comprehensive land use plan and the reasonableness of the zoning. That would be, in my humble estimation, the appropriate next step for this. This initial consideration does not and cannot act as a final determination on this matter. Therefore, we would certainly recommend again that you forward this to the planning board for their recommendation.
And then that, the planning board will come back with a recommendation and we have a chance to review it. So tonight, all we're going to do tonight is pass this on for review to the planning board. We should approve this.
This is a time that town council, if you have any concerns about this project, you can pass those on to the planning board so they can be aware of those and factor those concerns in.
The planning board already knew something about this a couple of years ago. Was it just because of the land being subdivided?
So,
Yes, please.
I'll fill you in. So, Duke bought it, and they came to Ben Howard. So there was conversation at least 3 years ago about them actually putting it in the upper, well, it'd be the southeastern corner right next to the highway. And there was conversations potentially using the rest of the land as a park for the town. And that was just conversation. So now they've been writing a proposal, and Al was very much in favor of trying to tie this property to the greenway. In fact, Doug Durkin and I both bought the property over 3 years ago. So they changed it to your point, and it's steep, right? It's very steep, and they're building it in the flat spot. So that will mitigate, so, yeah, that was part of that. So, yeah, it probably, people, when you put people on zoning would have heard about it, at least out.
So it's steep throughout, or just where you see the topo lines?
The total lines are, I think, probably fairly accurate, okay? So it's a steep piece of property, and they're building it in the flat part of that property.
What will be seen from the road, a lot, or do we know?
There's a rendering on the following page of your packet that I believe does a good job of demonstrating where the structure and the power lines would be in relation to the existing vegetation. Lost my computer, I pulled it up on the screen.
Page 60?
Yeah. You're gonna see it.
Well, I mean, you see the one that the, right as you enter Asheville with the old Sam's.
I mean, that page 60, your point, and John, you know, that's pretty good. Page 60 is
I should have looked it over, but
pretty accurate.
Answered some of my own questions. It's steep.
Okay.
So, is there any more questions or discussion about the sign? Is there a motion to pass this on to the planning board?
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Stella, would you do your new duty?
Councilmember Wood. Councilmember Chase.
Yes.
Councilmember Cordell.
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson. Yes. Mayor Fitzsimmons.
Yes.
Councilmember McKenna.
Yes.
Councilmember Hager.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Might as well stay up there, Jane, because the next item is an update on the GIS implementation, and would you give us an update?
Yes, sir. Thanks again. Just a quick update on the implementation of the town's GIS system. I'd written on the agenda cover page that this was to go live in the coming days. It actually went live this past Thursday. So if you go to the planning page on the town's website, you'll be able to view our bright, shiny new zoning map.
Caught me by surprise today.
Also, at council's direction, we're doing some work with our friends at Highland Mapping as well to help out with the MS4 stormwater permit and all that stuff that Jennifer's been speaking to you guys about for the past few years. The next step in the process is going to be a big one. It's basically an inventory of our stormwater system. Dell has the equipment en route. We have another meeting with various parties on Friday to continue that conversation as well. So as time progresses, the GIS system will get more and more information imported into it. We think it'll be a very useful tool for the town and its citizens. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions about GIS?
I was glad to see it today. I had to go there. I wanted to go there to look at something, and I was like, this is new. So, good
You
job.
did read the budget, just as a reminder.
Yeah, good job. Pretty cool.
Thank you for your work. I look forward to looking at it, you know, myself. Any other questions on this item? If there are none, next item is a code amendment on dog waste disposal. And Attorney Jackson, this is your chance to shine.
So James, just a second ago, mentioned your MS4, this is your stormwater, and one of those, EPA considers dog waste a pollution of water systems, or water bodies. And it's most commonly occurring through stormwater on dog waste that hasn't been picked up. That introduces exposure to your community, to bacteria, parasites, other bad stuff too. So in order to reduce the water pollution related to dog waste, the stormwater management plan does call for the adoption of some code amendments to require dog owners or handlers to be good pet owners and pick up their waste. So if adopted, these code amendments would require the removal of dog waste from public property, public park property, and public right of way, and certain private property. Obviously, if you've got your own piece of private property, if you can clean it up if you wish, If you want other folks to be on your property and let their dogs roam without cleaning up, that's totally fine. But if you're not doing, if you haven't granted that permission, then you should be cleaning up after your pet. There are certain limited exceptions for dogs that are accompanying folks with disabilities. If you have a disability that does not allow you to do that, then that is an exception. I also wrote these regulations with the enforcement through non-criminal fines and penalties. We can certainly circle back to that if in a bigger project that we need to bring back to you at some point concerning the criminal, non-criminal conversation as to the entire ordinance. I mean, entire code.
Are there any questions for Karen?
I have a question, and that is on enforcement. Let's say you're walking where you normally walk, and some stranger comes by with a dog, they don't pick it up afterwards. You don't even know who they are, they don't have to give you their name, you just say you buzz off, and they don't really know the bill.
It's a problem. Obviously, we need to know who the offenders are in order to be able to effectively enforce. But this does give some opportunity for enforcement. More than anything, it reminds folks to be a good citizen and honor these code provisions in order to do that.
I'm all for it, don't switch it.
And we're required to do this because of the stormwater on the sea.
Correct.
Any other questions or discussion?
I have a question. When an ordinance becomes, when a code or an ordinance gets changed like this does, how does the town know that? I mean, who tells them?
That's a good question. I intend with the next e-focus to have an article on this. You'll actually have a couple of notes on stormwater issues in the upcoming e-focus, but I also typically will put that on the Facebook page as well.
Clint's gonna make it front page.
Right.
Clint's loud, he's gonna have fun writing this.
But that's a good question.
Very good.
We're all need a ticket pad
If there are no other questions, I entertain a motion to pass this ordinance.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Yes, we did.
I did.
You did, oh, thank you. Joe, you want to call a roll?
Councilmember Nagel,
No.
Vice Mayor McKenna,
Yes.
Mayor Fitzsimmons,
Yes.
Councilmember Jackson,
Yes.
Councilmember Cordell,
Yes.
Councilmember Chase,
Yes.
Councilmember Wood.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. The next item is an update on water reutilization conversations, and for those of you who remember, we had a water system committee on council that did a lot of analysis about possibly expanding a water plant, and they directed myself and the town manager to meet with other municipalities and potential partners in the area to discover if there are any kind of collaborative opportunities that might be available to us as we pursue this project. So I can tell you that we've met with Buncombe County. Buncombe County, quite frankly, said that they didn't relish getting into the water business, so they didn't really have any interest or desire to work with us on that. However, they did say that they are now accepting applications or proposals for their rescue plan monies, and a large portion is designated for infrastructure projects. And this is we have something that we would need to fund to facilitate expansion of their water plant in the future, that they would certainly consider funding that. And so, somebody in the buyer got the application, and it's due April 12th, I believe.
Very quick.
And we've come up with a couple ideas about what we can apply to get the county to help pay for some portion of some parts of this project. We also met today with Morris Hill, and we were supposed to actually meet with Marshall and Morris Hill together. But through a snafu, the Marshall folks didn't have our town meeting show up, the Marshall folks were there. Marshall is in a very lucky position. They have a reservoir, and they are only utilizing about 38% of their water at this point. So they had no need for any well at this point. They felt very comfortable for a while. However, they believe, and we'll talk to Marshall, that Marshall does have a much more pressing issue. And it just happens that we have a line that runs from here to Mars Hill. And Madison County has recently received a state allocation of $12 million to build a line that connects Marshall to Mars Hill. So one thing we want to talk to Marshall about, is there a possibility somehow we can work collaboratively with Marshall and again, tie them onto our system, and then seek state funding for that, for the expansion of the water plant and any additional funds for the water line. That would mean that the water would pass through Mars Hill from here on its way to Marshall. But there's a possibility that we could get some significant funding from the state to facilitate this. We had folks from Land Sky and Regional Council today, and the state has substantial amounts available for infrastructure improvements coming up. It does require us, if we did anything like this, it does require us to move quickly because the deadlines for this are like in May. However, it is anticipated that they will not use all those funds in the spring, in May, and there'll be a second funding opportunity in the fall. Of course, that's all. No, but that's what the anticipation is. We have also talked with Woodfin. Woodfin's going to be talking to us as well. They have recently just hired a new town manager. They asked if we could give her a month to get in office and get worked a little bit before we have a competition, but they are also very interested, so we'll reach out to them sometime in April, so we'll meet with them as well. And Selena and I said that we would call the Marshall folks tomorrow and see if we can't set up a Zoom call or maybe even another meeting quickly to consider the plan, the ideas that came up from today's conversation. So we'll do that. Hopefully this week that will happen, because if we're going to pursue that, there's a moving deadline that we need to do so. So I think that's it now. Selena, do you have some other things that I may have missed that you wanted to add to that?
Just a couple of things, and I'm hesitant to even bring this subject up, projects and water development, or water applications. We do have had the conversation tonight about the Hollywood Weaver project. We're still on a 6-month pause at this time, while we meet with other jurisdictions and neighbors and those that are interested in potential for water treatment plant expansion. But I do want to just make you aware that we do still have other projects coming forward. Like we anticipate a project, it's Pleasant Grove Townhomes project off Prince Creek. It's a 54-unit townhouse development, 10 acres. We do have a water line extension request from them in hand. And this is proposed to stay outside of town limits. So all of these that I'm mentioning to you that we're anticipating are outside of town limits. But we feel like we need to be aware of these, and if there's any direction that you would like to formally give to staff tonight, this would be a good time for it. There's another project, affordable housing project on Monticello Road, 168-unit apartment complex on 11 acres. Looking at annexation, conditional district, and water allocation. We expect to get that anytime soon. We do not have that in hand yet. And then finally, outside of the Hollywood Road project, there's another one in the valley below North Ridge Commons off Hill Branch Road. This is a residential development of 38 acres. The property is available for annexation by Weaverville, but accessible to both Woodfin Water and Weaverville Water. So those are just to keep you up to date on those. Barring any kind of formal action by town council tonight, we will be bringing forward at least the Pleasant Grove Townhomes project per procedure to your next meeting for consideration.
Do you know the GIS, so what is your code on that one off Monticello, 34 acres?
It's an aggregate of 3 properties at the bottom of Gill Branch Road.
Quick question. What is the status of the grant monies that Withers Ravenel is trying to get for us for the necessary improvements that we're doing?
We do not have an update real recent.
They're working on the application, and I have an email. It's sometime in April.
And I think that decision was going to come like June or something, so it's still time, okay.
Well, I would like to not see any more requests for water until we have something that's legitimate, that we have decided on to do with our water moving forward. And then the question for you I had, Patrick, was I don't believe there is a water line from Mars Hill to Marshall.
No, they don't have state funding to build.
So, yeah, and that's gonna be 4 or 5 years to build that. And so, you know, you sit there and say, that still makes us at our 200,000 gallons a day commitment to Mars Hill. Even though there's only 600 people or 600 houses in Marshall, so they don't use as.
About 200,000 gallons a day.
So that would be the pass through. Everything that we've committed to Mars Hill that we've been sitting and saying, well, they don't really use it, they would start using it, so we would have to continue with that. It wouldn't be in our back pocket like it has been.
So let me speak real quickly to that, unless you want to speak to that. We had that conversation with Marshall today. That's Marshall.
One letter difference. One letter.
He also talked about the fact that it's been a free commitment, and, you know, for us to hold back all this.
So it's not a commitment at this point in time. The agreement has expired. It is a commitment in that we have remained committed, but the agreement with the town and Mars Hill has expired. We did have a conversation today. They do have an interest in re-upping that agreement. We did not talk about any kind of expense. It would be my recommendation to you that it not be a free commitment going forward, that we look at some type of payment for that, even though it is an emergency allocation only at this point in time.
Another thing we did discuss, and Dale, maybe you can help us out with this, is this would be water flowing from Weaverville to Mars Hill. What if the emergency was on our end? Is that reversible? Could we tap into their water with that line?
Is it a one-way line or two-way line? Truth, the one that can answer that.
Okay.
As far as I know, that's kind of one way due to pressure differences. I think maybe that's the way it was designed, but Dale's probably actually the best answer. I think he was involved in that.
Water flows from the treatment plant to a line near the Ivy River, on Old Weaverville Marshall Highway. From there, it flows a Mars Hill line down and crosses Ivy Creek and into a pump station that pumps the water to Mars Hill. And so if we wanted that water in reverse, I don't think we have the pumping capabilities to pump their water back to us.
Because it obviously is mutually beneficial if we could both depend on each other in one emergency.
Well,
That be changed.
yes, with enough money and time.
To your point, Catherine, I'm in agreement with you, but I don't think staff can stop an application from coming in. But, so that, when I was asking James at the bottom of Gill Branch Road, we had this conversation when we were talking about zoning with the town of Woodfin, and then we have first right of refusal for that area, right, Jennifer?
Say that again?
When we made this don't kill each other zoning agreement with the town of Woodfin.
Yes.
And we pointed out,
Yes.
on the east side of 26, south of Monticello, there is hundreds of acres of available land, not counting where north of Monticello, where our two apartment projects, the third one that she mentioned for the affordable housing is across the street from there from Monticello. So there's hundreds of acres available, and then at some point, Woodfin Water, so there is two big developments there already. and they get water from Woodfin, not from us, but they're not in Woodfin. So Woodfin's water, correct me if I'm wrong, Woodfin's water commission has nothing to do with the town. Right, so they don't follow town limits and they sell their water the way they want. But you're correct, and I'm gonna agree with you that, you know, especially out of town, said it before, I'm not in favor of any projects out of town. So we-
Well, and you can, before it even comes in, if they're saying there's 11 acres and they want 168 units, that's 15 point something per acre. We have never approved that.
That's why they're gonna ask for conditional limits. Has he called you?
No, I'm the only one who hasn't called because I'm gonna say no.
No, I haven't heard you. Yeah, well, my recommendation to Landon, because he called me first or second, was to call all of you individually. I didn't want to be explaining his project to people.
Landon is represented from LDG Corporation.
And where was the 38 acres?
At the bottom of Gill Branch Road.
The 38 acres.
That's the valley. And Councilman Nagel is correct. That was the subject of the annexation agreement that the towns of Weaverville and Woodfin entered into, gosh, a year and a half ago. And so this property is available to town of Weaverville to be annexed, not Woodfin.
Right.
But it could be served through either Woodfin or Weaverville's waters.
I think bringing these projects up just underscores I wouldn't say the urgency, but the relevancy of making decisions on water, with regard to water treatment plant expansion or developing regulations that curb development in town. I think that's our bottom line. We're gonna continue to see these applications, and Councilman Nagel is correct. We can't stop folks from applying. If we can.
That's why we took the, direction we recommended, and you guys are going out there, and I think I mentioned, or you mentioned Madison County contacted me too, they want to talk, so this is all good. It's a regional issue, even if it's been our resources we've been managing.
So do yourself a favor, go to the GIS, type in 171 Monticello Road, and then look southeast of Walmart and the other side of the highway, and start adding up all that land. And it's farmland that people are dropping $1 million for 10 acres. Right, so we know what Dale sold hers for. It all becomes public record.
It's like, so your property at premium right now, so.
So between Acre Road and Monticello, on that side of the highway, just look at all the vacant land, and they either get walk if they want to develop. They can be in the county, get water from Woodfin in some of those cases, or they can, but that is right for development, and there's a huge apartment coming off of Lake Road on that side of that Lackey Lane. It's gonna go up. So that's, we need to be cognizant of that and try to make good decisions, but getting offered big bucks.
That's right. Okay, any other discussion aside? If not, let's move on to something a little more lighter, the recreation complex update. And,
Before we go too far, know that not to shoot staff when.
no, in fact, anticipate that probably every month, we're gonna get some new development. Besides the ones that Selena has mentioned, we know that there's other land that is there that's a little larger than land. And so you can anticipate that there's some kind of project we can help all that too. So we're gonna be seeing this come to us regularly.
This is why I didn't want to wait on this water situation. We're all gonna be taking baths in creeks.
We are now. Mr. Pennell, tell us about our recreation complex.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm glad to be here. Hopefully this will have a little more enjoyment to it. More prepared. Look on page 76 in your packet. Back in January, we had some discussion in council about what possibilities were for developing the old pool property, as we call it, into our phase two of the community center and the recreation facility there. So what I did, when we did the survey for the work on the community center, I had them go ahead and survey this property as well. So we've got an accurate to-scale survey map of that property. And what I've done with it is taken the recommendations that I heard at that January meeting of pickleball courts, tennis court, a long game area, half-court basketball, restrooms, handicap parking, and then a trail to the lower parking area below the community center. And I've put together this sketch that you see in front of you. And what I want to do is just go through some real quick highlights with it so you understand how this can actually be done, how these improvements can actually be made on this property. The first thing that you'll see there is where the northern tennis court is. It's in red and green. That's on an area that's two different elevations. You get down there, you turn in the driveway of the community center, of the pool building property. You know, there's a bank on your left that leads up to a higher note. And then there's a flat area in front of you. What we're gonna have to do is grade that knoll down so it matches the elevation of the rest of the property. We're gonna leave a 10, 12-foot buffer along the adjoining property to the north and do some plantings there, but we need the dirt from that to fill in the lower corner where the pickleball courts are shown. So we need to grade that area so it's all flat. And then we're going to have an area there to build 2 tennis courts. And I've shown one in the red and green that fits. The other one is exactly where the 3 pickleball courts are. And I want to do that on purpose so I can show you that from the USA Pickleball Association. That's the exact size of a pickleball. And what that does is leave you room between the pickleball courts to put in a small fence between each one that catches balls if you get them off the side. And you also got room around the outside of that. But I left enough of the red boundary there under the pickleball court to show you that it fits exactly inside that court. Now, the tennis court can be built as a tennis court, but it can also have temporary or semi-permanent striping within the tennis court area to put 2 tennis courts there so you can play tennis and or play on 2 pickleball courts. Feel there might be some decision in the future that you'd rather have 3 pickleball courts there. We already have a walking trail that's part of the phase 1 project that goes from the sidewalk on Lake Shore over to the trail that goes down through the woods and comes into the parking lot. We're going to have to relocate that just a little bit to make room for the tennis court. But that's made out of the same sand screenings that we make the trail around the lake with. So that's no problem to do that. Since the people that are coming to use this are doing it from a recreation standpoint, they'll park down at the community center and then walk up the sidewalk to get to it. So the only parking that we need is handicap parking. So we have room there to put at least 3 handicap spots. And and you see how that's laid out. And then there's a little rectangle that says shelter. And that used to be the building where we kept Santa's sleigh. We're building down, but we left a concrete slab, and that slab is big enough that we can put a canopy, sort of a shelter on that, and a couple of picnic tables, so the next group of people who are coming to play pickleball have a place to sit and rest, you snack, meet their friends, of course, their turn. Then there's room to put a half basketball court there that will have a full width of the court, so you can have a three-point line there. And then, finally, the whole building that's there used to be the restrooms and the storage and the page a quarter to swim in the pool years ago. We gutted that building and we re-roofed it and we painted it and it's ready to be renovated. And so if you look on page 77, that's a two-scale drawing of that building. The black outline of it is what's sitting there right now. And we've come up with a very simple plan there to be able to have some storage on each end. One with a roll-up door, one with a regular door. The heavy red lines represent internal walls that we can build. And we can have a women's restroom and a men's restroom, fully handicap accessible, with actually a little room there to put a small bench for folks if they decide they want to make a change before they go back to work after the pickleball.
Has anybody in the room played pickleball? Two of you. Did you?
I've played before.
I can't wait to play.
No, you can play.
I'm gonna wait till it shows up and
So, basically, these two sheets, I hope, show number one, that we can take our existing building and renovate it. Now we've got restrooms and,
those restrooms, they can operate in the winter, right?
well, I was just deciding to mention that in my budget request, I'll be coming to you and actually money in there to provide heat for the building.
Good.
What about heat for the other restaurants?
Down the lake. Yes, but it's going to be much smaller. Yes. And so
They should play pickleball cold, build an afternoon cold.
No, the problem is they closed them because the ice is free.
You know, so what I think, the town manager and I are looking for today is, I need you to give us some idea about, if you think that we captured what you asked us to do back in January, so that we can, have opportunity to get started. What we thought about doing with this is we could prepare a pretty large set of plans, go through a bidding process, and hire a general contractor or public works department and can start the process by using local small contractors to do work. We need a contractor to do grading, contractor to do concrete work with courts, contractor to do fencing, contractor to put up the canopy, contractor to put up do the striping and prepare the surface of the courts. And my folks wouldn't have to do a lot except just monitor and maintain and check on them. But I think we can do this within the budget that you set aside.
Don't say that. We have not looked at figures, so that's not.
Just enough of.
Just enough to get us in a table.
Yeah, I think you captured all the things that, the public meeting we had in December, right? When I heard all the groups talking about your concept drawing back then and the number of people that weighed in, there was a lot of racket sports of pickleball, there was discussion on half-court basketball. There was a pump track suggestion that like from one, and I like the way you laid it out, it's pretty compact. Two, is there still, maybe you talked about it, is there still provision for a walking trail around? Or is that?
Walk on the trail in the middle of that, down to the community center, through the parking lot, up the sidewalk.
Okay.
It's still there.
Okay, got it. So it's not around the perimeter of this property, it's just around the greater, okay, got it. Yeah.
Well, the other issue that we may have to ask folks to do, sort of thought about this a little bit in talking to Shelley this morning. We have to ask people to carve. If you think about, if we had 6 pickleball courts, and each pickleball court has 2 people on each side of the net. Anyway, 20 people. That's 24 people. So that's, if they come individually, that's 24 cars. Then the next group will be there before the first group finishes. So that's 48 cars, and we only have 43 parking spaces at the community center.
Right, and that's already a problem. One of the things that I wrote down was, we went for an event and there was no parking. And so what's happening is, the lake is getting so full of people walking that they're parking at the community center. And then you get the pickleball people parking at the community center, and then the people who actually reserve the community center are not gonna be able to be there. And so I was gonna recommend that we buy some signs or something that Shelby puts up on the days that she knows that she has reserved that place, that the parking is reserved for the people who have paid to rent the community center. And that, it shouldn't be, I mean, that's what they're paying for, is to rent that room. They gotta have somewhere to park too. So it's not fair to get there and not be able to find something, and, brides walking from, Ingalls to the community center. Without sidewalks, having to climb across the creek.
Well, that's a point that we're gonna have to spend some time discussing, because then you've also got the museum that's in there. Shelby had 6 events there this weekend, 3 on each day. And some of those were overlapping by using the smaller room and the bigger at the same time.
So there you go, make Lake Shore Drive one way and then have parking all the way around.
Yeah, what, can we force that conversation? Because everything I've heard is that I haven't heard anybody say, no, that doesn't make sense.
We have had this conversation at least once a year since I've been here, and that's coming up on 7 years.
One of the suggestions within Thomas well.
I spoke with Thomas Busey about about this, because I thought it might have come up before. And he said there is one resident on, is it Lake Shore, whatever the street is, who has a truck and a trailer, and the way the one way would be, he would not be able to back into his driveway. And so they dropped it a couple years ago. And I don't think,
Oh, excuse me.
I don't know who that is. I don't know if this truck does this every day or if it's once a month, and I don't know if that driveway can, something can be done about that. But there is a resident, he was.
Work around that, one person.
Yeah, that's,
Do you recall, were there any other, what were the other objects?
No, there were, I mean, it was a table topic several times. There hasn't been a huge.
I think now it's coming to us from residents though, that actually live in there.
It was actually coming to us from residents before.
Okay.
I would like to wrap up this conversation. Before we go down that path, we can certainly talk about that.
Before you cut off, I'd like to say something.
Well, what I would like to do is just ask that town council give us direction that you would like to proceed as it's laid out.
Yes,
And then what I would propose to you is that we bring back a budget within the budget, the upcoming budget. You get that, at the April meeting. So you'll see it there, and at that point in time, what I would consider doing, Dale has not talked to me about his big plan of having Public Works do all this.
So Dale, I got a question for you though, on that second point about the work itself. Is there an opportunity here to have some of this done by townspeople, volunteers under your direction? Or is it, any of it?
Well, talk about liability.
I get the liability thing, and I'm just gonna ask you anyway, because, what a great, rallying kind of project, like, hey, here's this part over here that we want public to work on, and the liability is this big, but I see frowns and no, we're not gonna touch it.
The
I think it's an opportunity.
work that maybe is around the perimeter, that has a good opportunity for a group to assist with. But as far as the internal part with the actual construction, grading, stone, concrete, lines, and painting, fence, renovations, and plumbing.
Okay.
Slightly off topic, but not exactly. I read about 5 days ago online that Range Creek Golf Course is replacing their 2 tennis courses with 6 pickleball courts.
That's right.
Yeah, good for them.
That was
I don't know if there's
No,
any.
It's like $1,000, it's private, it's like $1,000
a year.
a year.
$1,000 a year.
Yeah, I mean, good for them, it makes sense, because it wasn't.
Dale, don't dwell on it, but it seems to me like we had this discussion regarding the one-way street around Litchfield. You pointed out some concerning factors that need to be taken into account. Let's get off base, but
I would recommend that you give staff some time to talk about this further before we just make off the cut comments.
Okay, so Dale, unanimous support for the recreation project. And since you're up there, could you also go ahead and give us your boiler report from Public Works?
We have to do that, very good. Last meeting with your public works. I'm just gonna get a few highlights, on page 79. Currently, with all the development around town, there's only one active project building water lines, and that's the Palisades or the AOI. All the other projects are finished and been closed out and are now using Weaverville water. The very last number on page 80 is our monthly unaccounted for water, and that's about 12.4%. As I reported to you before, anything below 10 is excellent. We've recently been made aware of a few times when we discovered water being used without being monitored or measured, and we're actively working to try to solve some of those cases. If you look on page 81, under the water capacity versus production category, and the very last line there says monthly usage plus future usage versus our capacity of the plant. Right now, we're 56%. That means we're either using or committed to use 56% of the water that's available from the plant. That's recently been up around 60, but it's dropping as projects actually come online. This doesn't include anything that was discussed tonight. And then on page 82, I want to go over 2 or 3 things that we have finished lately. Of course, water treatment plants on hold. The radio read meter change out project is finished. And we have a very nice article in the Tribune to that effect. Thank you. We're in a process in preparation for this upcoming budget and for the money that's in the current budget. We're in the process of reevaluating the condition of all the town streets. There's 112 separate streets in town. And we're about a third through, and we're hoping to finish that hopefully this week. And that'll give us, it's a numerical evaluation, and that'll give us a numerical value for every street in town. And so we can go from Perfect Street to Terrible Street. And the numerical value will help us decide which ones fit at the bottom that need to be paved, or fixed, or reworked, and moved up to the top.
is that the same format we had about 8 to 10 years ago when you prioritized?
Yeah, a few tweaks.
And keep in mind about this project, again, Dale's talking about his budget here, and we haven't even looked at it. That's expensive. So one thing that I would caution us is to assume that we're gonna be able to complete all of those year 1 projects in the first year. Every year we've tried to do that, and it rarely happens unless we have a really nice shortfall, or not shortfall, but a really good estimate, and keep coming in below.
If you can imagine, prices of asphalt work, it's,
What was last year, what did we pay per mile? Do you remember?
mile. I'll have to get back to you on that. Asphalt last year was about $110 a ton. No, asphalt in 2019 was $110 a ton. It's somewhere north of $150 a ton. And fortunately, though, the streets that we've looked at thus far that we paved 10, 12 years ago, we did them right, and they're holding up. And their numbers are way up in the 90s as far as their current merit. So we're doing them right, but it takes. Regarding our stormwater program that Jim and I are working on, we've begun doing maintenance work on the applied stormwater line. The town responsible for it. The person was at the bottom of the steps coming down the parking lot. The renovations for the restrooms at Lake Louise are nearly finished inside. They started on the roof of that building today. And then we'll get that roof done, and we'll take out the old skylights and put a roof on it that exactly matches the shields on the community center. Outside will exactly match the paint on the community center. And then we got to paint the exterior to match it. Be ready to open up. We're saying by the end of April. Everything goes good. And then finally, last thing we've done, and I hope you've noticed, folks have finished all the mulching around town hall, fire department, police department, nature bar, Lake Louise, community center.
And it looks amazing. It looks awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it looked perfect. Can I ask a question on page 80? Halfway down, A2, and then B, under it where it says, right in the middle, where it says finished water used. So it'll be 3B. Total metered, metered, non-metered, and non-billed used by the town. How does it go down to 4? I know February is a small month, but it's up in January, down in February, but I know there's got to be a logical reason. Can you explain that to me?
Because of the weather that we had in February, particularly cold, didn't do any highway testing, we didn't do any street washing, we didn't use any water. There had no construction, or anything going on that used water for testing or hydro flowing, or anything. We had a very low month, abnormal.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, appreciate it. Does anyone have any important business to bring before the body this evening? I'll take a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Have a second. All those in favor say aye. Thank you.